Hey, how you doing? This is Brian James Shanley, and you are listening to Brian James Shanley Raw, that playlist on my YouTube channel that has specifically to do with dealing with the issues that ripple through our culture from a Western and Christian perspective. And this is a continuation of the most recent episode, in which it was called Quarantine 2020, with the subtitle, Who Wins? And it was meant to impregnate, plant an idea in your mind, in your brain, to question what's going on, to literally ask questions as you see the great-great-grandbabies of the people who saved the world from Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and the Emperor of Japan, just a couple generations later, walking around Walmart behind police tape, with gloves on, with masks on, afraid to interact with each other. My question was just, who wins? Who stands to benefit from Americans taking some kind of orders like that seriously? And it was meant to just, get you thinking like, hey, on a deeper level, I'm looking at the Wizard of Oz, but is there a man behind the curtain that I really need to look at? And apart from the normal pat, rehearsed, regurgitated, unimpressive, borrowed, cliched things that they parrot. All right, you're a conspiracy theorist. All right, you're this, you're that, whatever. The names they've been programmed like Pavlov's slobbering dog to call you to stop you from asking questions. I got criticized on the last one more than anything because of how short it was. So sometimes I get criticized if I go too long on a subject. Sometimes I get criticized if I go too short on a subject. You can't win. I don't know what the problem is, but the reason I only gave it a couple of minutes is because I wanted to lightly ask the question. I have found that in terms of discussing the coronavirus, the COVID-19, et cetera, not everybody who desires to be received as an authority on your friends list and in your various discussions, not all of them are competent to even have the discussion beyond the most basic levels. And I did not want to go down that path and have people who are not competent to even handle the issue begin sounding off as though they know something. I just didn't want to give them that platform. I just wanted to subtly make you think. But since I'm criticized that it was too short rather, people want me to flap my lips even longer on the subject, I'll go ahead and hit it again a second time if it makes you feel better. A couple of quick housekeeping things before I do that. I have reason to believe that there is censorship being done to my work, literally active suppression, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Spotify, all this other crap. I don't even have half of the crap. I do know that all these things fall under the umbrella of what I've always called big tech. Big tech. One day you're going to hear that as a mainstream word. The difference between then and now is you're getting it from me today. Just remember where you heard it. But big tech is very hyper preoccupied, almost frantic to control the conversations and the dialogues taking place among the populace. Why would a big technological corporation care what Joe Schmo who works at Chick-fil-A says to John Doe who sells shoes about any subject? Well, they sure do. And so if you're going along and getting along with the message that the one world globalist corporations want you to address, they leave you alone. They don't screw with you at all. But if you have something to say that's different than theirs, their response is, we've got to shut this person up. So they got community standards, and they've got, what is the other thing they say? Fake news or false information, or our fact checkers. That's really fun. When a bought and sold corporate-owned fact checker, it's like watching a presidential debate on NBC, and then, right, our fact checkers are checking. It's like these are the people who are hired to try to disrupt the message. And they don't care about facts. They care about controlling your access to the facts and denying your access to other facts. But in any event, I'm getting people messaging me saying, hey, I was following you on Facebook or on YouTube, and then one day I looked up and I wasn't subscribed anymore. Did you get rid of me? No, I didn't get rid of you. YouTube did. Or like I literally typed in your proper name and the name of the episode into search criteria, very specific, very surgical, and it wouldn't locate you. So I'm asking you to double check whether or not you're still subscribed to the Brian James Shanley YouTube channel. If you're not, please resubscribe. You can like it, you can comment. I know that the algorithms are being manipulated, and so people who are vomiting out whatever the corporations want them to say, they're trending, even if no one's looking at them. They got robots adding to the number of views and stuff. I can't compete with robots, but to people who are saying something different, there's a literal, active attempt to make sure you never hear their voice. What did they used to call me in the early 2000s? They'd say, his is the voice they hope you never hear. And we're down the corridor of time 20 years later, and that's never been more of an accurate statement than it is right now. So double check to make sure big tech is not trying to come between me and you. And I used to say in the late 1990s when I'd write a Bible tract or a booklet, read it now while it's still legal. Of course, that phrase failed to find an audience back then, but now all of a sudden that makes a heck of a lot of sense. As the rabbinic, the rabbis used to write, time vindicates the prophets. You know, people aren't always understand during the time in which they live, but later on it makes more sense. That's one of the, if you have an Isaiah-style ministry or whatever, one of the, it's a two-edged sword. One, you get to speak the truth, but another, sometimes it fails to find an audience in your time period. That generation of people you're speaking to literally fails to grasp what you're saying. But a generation down the road, your autobiography becomes required reading. They've got you on a t-shirt. You didn't live to see it. Whatever. Anyways, so as we sit here in the coronavirus quarantine of 2020, I know that this time period will not be remembered for viruses. You know, there's a variety of the Chinese flu that's on the mainstream television. It's the top breaking headline. Every day there's another story meant to frighten you. You know, and on it's always the trending topic. So and anyone who does not subscribe to the position of you need to be afraid, that person is maligned pretty violently. And one of the reasons I didn't do any more beyond that. But so here's the deal. As I sit here right now in 2020, we have somehow imagined that the best way to treat a virus, a flu that's popular in the culture right now, that's seems to be at least talked about, if nothing else, the best way to treat it is totalitarianism, is suppressing people's freedom and their rights. I don't know what the hell medical book that is, where you would look up, what's the cure to this virus? You know, it's not treating the symptoms, letting it pass through your body. It's literally, let's tell people they can't leave their house. And I gotta tell you, this is the only generation of American people that would have heard a governor say, you can't leave your house. And they'd say, okay, governor, please tell me more, please. You know, I think if they tried this in any other time period, the first time a governor tells you you can't leave the house and you say, okay, I won't leave the house, you're by definition a slave. Did 2 houses of the bicameral legislature of your state pass a law functioning as your representatives? Was it vigorously debated on the floor, passed through the state senate, then passed through the state house, or vice versa, then went to the governor for signing, then, or if they vetoed it, was it overridden by a 2/3 vote? None of these things happen. A governor just decided, not having a Christian or a Western or an American mentality, that I'm the governor, I can sign some stuff and you have to stay home because I say so. And very, very displeasing. I'm reminded of Marx and Engels. They wrote in the Communist Manifesto that They first had to win the battle for socialism, but in order to do that, they had to win the battle for democracy. So you'd go from a republic to a democracy to socialism to totalitarian communism. There are multiple stops on this bus ride, but when it comes to democracy, as it were, they understood that it was a fluid, a changing form of government, and whatever time period you're living in, it was always up for grabs because it was a slave. It was utterly dependent on whatever 51% of the population believed to be important, thought to be true and beautiful and moral and worth fighting for at a given time. So whatever they could train, whatever they could manipulate the majority to think, to believe, to react to, that could be used in a propaganda campaign to engineer their beliefs and their behavior, literally trick them into participating in voting for a fundamental transformation of their own form of government. Consequently, an overthrow of existing social, political, and economic conditions, all under the guise of we're going to make life better for you. Before we can put up B, we have to burn A to the ground, you see. This vision was always international in the writings of Marx and Engels. It was always meant for the entire world, if not one nation at a time, but eventually the entire world is to be under this form of government. So we're sitting here taking orders from government health programs such as the CDC. Because, the government health programs are very reliable. They injected black people with syphilis during the Tuskegee experiments. They injected people with radioactive isotopes in order to experiment and gauge how radiation would affect them. They conducted the MK Ultra mind control experiments with LSD. You can look all this stuff up, but my ultimate point is don't minimize your own freedom. Don't leave your freedom at the feet of the world, the flesh, the devil, the apostate church, and heathen government. Don't minimize your freedom in order to maximize the authority of these bastards. All right? You can't see an angle being worked, I'm going to get deeper into this, and I'm going to hit it from multiple angles, and we'll have a more fleshed out conversation. I'm also disappointed that the American Christian Church, the bride of Christ as it exists in the United States of America, literally heard the tyrant, literally heard the local governor say, you can't get together and worship. And they said, okay, governor. And they closed their doors because the governor told them to. I can't tell you how disgusted I am by that behavior. I can't tell you how in the minority I probably am based on this behavior. I can tell you this. For 2,000 years, on every continent, the Christian church has, as part of our history, heritage, and culture, we faced the tyrant's brandished steel. We faced the lion's gory mane. We faced the fires of 1,000 deaths. And we have to follow in their train. This is part of who we are. And all over the world right now, Christians in Iraq, Iran, Syria, Malaysia, Indonesia, Iran, Pakistan, etc. I think I said Iran twice. Parts of India. If they take the name of Christ on their lips in a public manner, they can get robbed, looted, raped, burned. Their genitals can be sawed off in front of people who are cheering and handing out candy. They can get their eyeballs sewn shut, their mouths sewn shut. They can be drowned. They can be, like I said, dragged through the streets. They're going to face consequences. China, they worship underground, right? Because there's consequences for taking the name of Christ. Because who are the people who are not on board with a one-world socialist, dictatorial, technocratic form of government? We're the only ones who are not on board with it. So we're the greatest threat. So we have to be made fun of. We have to be made a mockery of. And ultimately, the people have to be trained to view us as dangerous. And what are we going to do about these problem people? So down through the decades in America, we've had it pretty decent for the most part. The persecution we've had to live through has been mild, usually around Easter or Christmas. It's a badly researched Peter Jennings ABC special where they literally make up fake history that never happened or speculate that nobody wrote what they wrote in the Bible, etc., etc. And people who are really stupid, who live in their mother's basement and play video games and write their name on the orange juice, would say, wow, that's really deep. Okay, so this was the pretty much the extent of the attacks that we would face. But the idea of having the Christian church shut down on Easter, the resurrection, the tomb was empty. That is the central message of the Christian church. Because he lives, I will live also. Because he rose from the grave, I will rise from the grave. Because death could not hold him anymore, death will one day not be able to hold me anymore. And I will be resurrected into a new body, incapable of getting sick, incapable of getting depressed, diseased, whatever. A mind, an intellect, and a heart that's not capable of sin and committing crimes against God in word and thought and deed. I'm going to be made new and complete. That is the message. It is the great hope, the glorious hope of the ages for the Christian. It always has been. Easter's the day we observe that. Can you imagine the atheists, the communists, the perverts, the lunatics, the statists who worship government as their God substitute, who've been trying to engineer a situation like this for 100 years? The high fives that they're giving themselves right now, the jig that they're dancing because they got the American Christian church to shut down. They literally told the clergy, don't worship. And the clergy said, okay, yes, please, please tell us more. Your wish is my command, Governor. And we went with it. We waved the white flag. And I'm very displeased. And I made a statement on March 25th where people gave me crap for this. I said, you know what? If your church closes down for the coronavirus, please do us all a favor by never reopening. I was criticized by that, whatever. And like I said, the time period in which I'm living never understands what I'm saying. But I remember in the 1990s, I was discussing this religious worldview called Islam that was gathering heat and momentum and information inside of our borders. And word was that there was going to be a major move on a major American city at some point. And as I talked about this in 1999, 2000, people were busy watching Michael Jordan win 6 world titles. They were busy watching Friends and Seinfeld. They were busy enjoying their .com boom or whatever, their technological boom. And they were having a good old time, And so me speaking about Islam, jihad, and terrorism in the 1990s didn't find an audience till they finally hit us. And they hit us hard and in a way that changed the country forever. Because again, that was a crisis that got us into such an emotional condition that we sat on our hands while they signed the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. Post 9/11 style totalitarianism that to this day has yet to be taken back. Okay? So there's a difference between discussing Islam, jihad, and terrorism in 2020 versus 2000, you see. Being ahead of your time carries with it a certain price. And I'm willing to pay that price if it wakes up even one person. But you have to ask yourself, as I asked in the previous episode of this show, who wins when you're afraid to go to Walmart? When someone says, we're going to shut down this park, and you say, okay, I won't go to the park. Then the conversation becomes divided. People who watch corporate-owned mainstream television and say, yes, television, please, please, instruct me more. Glad I'm home, quarantined, so I can get more instructions, download more propaganda and more, do my thinking for me, please. There's that person, and there's the person who doesn't watch that, who just looks at things from an outsider's perspective and says there's something wrong here. That becomes a conflict in the culture, and you're seeing it take place on your discussion chains of your social media. Okay? You're seeing some people say, well, I work in the medical field. That's great. That's an appeal to authority. That's like saying, I play in the NFL, therefore you can't possibly discuss football. It doesn't mean anything. Matter of fact, if you work, I'm a nurse. That's supposed to end the discussion to some of these people. All it does is it means you work for a hospital, and a hospital belongs to a healthcare network, and the network reports to people who are taking a company line. So your front line carrying the bucket, carrying a company line for somebody who cuts your paycheck. I would suggest that since I'm not in that position, I have less handcuffs intellectually and morally on the subject, so I can look at it in a more objective manner. So when you say, I'm a nurse and let me tell you how dangerous this is, I don't really care. I'm not a nurse. I'm not being paid by the hospital to advance the company line. So whatever, I can look at it in a way you lack the ability to see it. Your paymaster signs your paycheck accordingly. You will believe such and such a thing because our company says so. If you worked at any company, telecom, computers, banking, their official position will always be something. And if you're going to work there, you have to find a way to mentally train yourself to accept as true and beautiful and moral and right their vision statement. And you have to totally sell yourself out to it. So when someone says, I work in the healthcare industry, you just don't understand. It doesn't really carry a lot of water with me, and it shouldn't carry a lot of weight with you either. So laying at the feet of the state, your freedom, in exchange for protection. I am reminded, I don't know if it was Jefferson or if it was Ben Franklin, who said, a person who's willing to exchange their freedom for safety will have neither freedom nor safety. They will lose both, but they deserve neither. A person in that intellectual, moral, and spiritual condition who's willing to make that deal with the devil, if you will, they don't deserve to be free, you know. So it makes sense that there's some people who are willing to say, yes, state, please protect me, please, please, please. I'm willing to not go out. I'm willing to be told what to do. I'm willing to shut down my business that I built from the ground up with my own two hands. I'm willing to not to go out and get my own money. I'm willing to wait for the state to issue some check. They're softening you up and they're getting you ready. Either they're going to lift this and try to go back to normal, but you can never forget that this happened because it's going to come back again, and it's going to come back 10 times worse. Or they'll never give this up, and this is but phase one, and they're ushering in something else. In order for the one world socialist government of the Antichrist to ultimately take over the earth and stick its nose in every human being's business, this is the first generation, A, where there's the technology for such a thing to exist, and B, where the people are in a condition where they'd be receptive to even hearing it. In my grandmother and great-grandmother's day, if this was being attempted, I think the first time a governor said, you need to stay home, the people would have kicked in his door, dragged him out by his hair, and made him answer some questions in the middle of the street. I believe that because that's the American spirit. I will not be enslaved by anybody. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. You know, when down through history, when the tyrant has said, give up your freedom, give up your weaponry, the Christian's response was always, I dare you to come and take it. Okay? And I'm thinking of 2,000 years of church history, whether it's the tyrant, the emperor, the king. I'm thinking of various church leaders, Polycarp, Athanasius, whoever, Justin Martyr, Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, Spurgeon, whatever. If somebody who runs the government said, the church can't get together and worship, what would be the response of a Jonathan Edwards? I don't think that governor would fare too well. And I think the church would say, fine, you better arrest me. I'd rather be arrested to a jail for standing for Jesus than be arrested to my house for being a coward. I literally believe that's how the Christian church would respond in other time periods. Yes, there's a flu going through the culture. Yes, wash your hands. Yes, if you're old. Yes, if you have a compromised immune system, take precautions. This is not a discussion about the medical science of the severity or the seriousness of the virus. Okay, bacteria knows no belief system, and this is not a discussion in that. This is a political discussion, and it's a theological discussion, which are two sciences of a kind in their own way. So I'm only speaking to the theology and the political philosophy. I'm not trying to minimize the medical science. Although taking the current flu virus, that's the top headline and the front page headline, and attempting to exaggerate that to where you want to scare people into saying, oh, I'm okay with being for the greater good. You know, please tell me to stay home. Please ruin my children's education. Please ruin their prom, their graduation. You know, please ruin the NBA and the NFL and everything in my culture. Please shut down every theater. I cannot imagine a generation of Americans before me that would have taken this, that would have bent over and taken this without serious resistance. And it's funny because just now, literally a month later, better late than never, there's people starting to protest, starting to sue their governors. I'm like, well, you're a month too late, but at least you're doing something. But I'm amazed that the mainstream corporate-owned television is trying to make these people sound like jerks. And Joe Schmo, who doesn't really understand these things beyond the television, is correct. They literally participate in calling the protesters jerks. The protesters are protesting for your freedom, dummy. Anyways, I've went on for about darn near 27 minutes, and I guess this is just a primer to some more content that I'll be doing. As long as they try to keep us in chains, you know, chains can take many forms. They don't have to be physical. All right. As long as they attempt to make slaves out of us, or whatever you want to call it, servants, serfs, I will be providing an equal and opposite response to that particular agenda, because if I sat here in this time period and said nothing, it would make me an accessory after the fact of these people's crimes. Evil triumphs when good men on the other side say nothing. And I hope something is said here that inspires you to be part of the conversation. I'm probably saying stuff that you're thinking, but you're afraid to say it, because your neighbor has been trained by the television to call you an Islamophobe, homophobe, xenophobe, conspiracy theorist. All these things, these are one-liners and character assassinating names to call you that were literally made by the marketing department of companies, some of them in bygone decades. Conspiracy theorist goes back to right after the Kennedy assassination, when anyone questioned the official position in the Warren report. You're just a conspiracy theorist. It's a way to call you a name and dismiss you without having to have a rational, well-reasoned, logical, and evidentiary discussion and fleshing out the issues. They challenge your right to even talk about it, you see. That's an elitism that's been going on for a long time. And that generation, it took a magic bullet theory for them to shut up for 30 years. Okay? We've got magic bullet theories of our own time period, and they're designed to shut you up. But if you're hearing something that's causing a rumbling in your stomach, like, he's saying the things that I want to say, but I haven't had the guts to say it, this is just the beginning. The gloves are getting set to come off. I believe I was raised up for a time just such as this, and I believe there are thousands of others just like me. And let's, in the name and honor of Jesus Christ, and as people who have inherited certain freedoms from previous generations of Americans who have paid with their life to make sure we have the freedom to do the things we do out of honor to them, sometimes we have to pay a price too. Every generation inherits the duty to pay a price to keep these things in operation. You look at the babies coming up. Do they deserve to live like this? No. This is either a test run for something that's coming down the road, or it's the beginning and it's here now. Either way, do not be asleep to what's happening. I urge you with all sincerity. We'll be talking again on this soon. May the one true and living God of the Hebrew Christian scriptures, the triune God, who in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, God the Son, performed work on behalf of the elect, the death, the burial, and the resurrection that makes the elect able to approach God. May that God bless and keep you and your family. And may you see your family as created in the image and likeness of God, and intrinsically on the basis of that bearing the image of God, be deserving of freedom and the chance to pursue their gifts and talents and dreams and to go out and make a mark. Are you willing to fight for it? Right now it's been a cold fight for a long time. I hope it doesn't break out into a hot fight on the streets, because that will be ugly. Right now, it's a war of rhetoric and it's a war of words. If you've been sitting on your hands watching one particular side dominate, open your mouth. God bless and keep you.